we're discussing the social and economic impact of child undernutrition in Ghana, riding on the back of a study conducted on the cost of hunger in Africa, but looking at Ghana, precisely Ghana. Well, my guests are Thomas Yanga. Mr. Thomas Yanga is with the United Nations World Food Programme. And then next to him is Dr. Margaret Agama Anyete. She's with the African Union Commission. Welcome. Good morning to the two of you. First of all, I had been reading articles on undernutrition, and these words kept coming up: malnutrition and undernutrition. I wonder if they mean one and the same thing, or they're disparate in meaning, so we can know we can use them interchangeably in our discourse.
No, they are different. They have different meaning. Malnutrition means both combines the undernutrition as well as the overnutrition. While
sorry, take that again.
I mean, malnutrition, is made of the undernutrition, the impact of the effect of undernutrition and overnutrition.
Oh, undernutrition. Okay, I'm sorry, yes, the accent.
Or yeah.
Okay.
So when you talk about the undernutrition, it's just one aspect of a malnutrition.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. So then, what is undernutrition?
Well, undernutrition is...
child undernutrition?
Yes, a child which is undernourished is a child that is not taking enough calorie that his body requires to have proper development, as well as also lacking some micronutrient that are required for the development of his food potential. So these combined makes what we call undernutrition, which is low intake in terms of calories, but as well as gaps in the micronutrient requirement for that child to have a proper development.
Okay. Well, Doc, I saw a UNICEF report on child undernutrition, which concluded that globally, significant progress has been made in reducing child undernutrition. In fact, so much so that in the last 25 years, there's been a significant reduction. Is that to say Ghana is not at par with this reduction, with this global reduction?
But yeah, the global trend is on the positive side in terms of reduction of malnutrition. But what the study of the cost of hunger have demonstrated is that in Africa, while in relative terms we have a trend in terms of reduction, but in absolute terms, the number of malnourished children, particularly stunted children, have increased over the last 20 years, which calls for action from the African government. And that's why I think the African Union have launched this initiative of conducting the cost of hunger in Africa to provide to government evidence on what is the situation, what is the impact of that malnutrition on their economy, and to call them to take appropriate action to try to address it.
So Dr. Margaret, the AU commissioned this study?
Yes, the AU commissioned this study once following an agreement after it was brought to the attention of the ministers of health of the state of nutrition in African countries. And subsequently, based on the early studies which were done, the heads of state of government then commissioned, adopted the cost of hunger in a decision which was taken in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea in 2014.
Okay, this must be absolutely necessary. What does it cost a nation that's inactive towards curbing child undernutrition?
It varies from country to country.
Okay.
And the beauty of the study is that the value, nutrition is then equated in monetary terms. The loss to a nation has been equated in monetary terms, and it varies from country to country. And for Ghana, it has been equated that the annual cost is 4.6 billion Ghana cedis, which is equivalent to 6.3% of the GDP.
How so? Please establish a correlation between child undernutrition and these figures, because I'm reading here that, well, I know the study will be launched later, but so I don't know if you're at liberty to divulge details of the study. But I read here just a brief result of the study demonstrating that Ghana's national economy loses 6.4% of GDP by government inaction through the adverse effects of child undernutrition. Please do a reconciliation between this and the figures we're talking about.
Well, as we have said, malnutrition of children under 5 have impact not only in some key sectors such as education, health, and productivity. That is throughout the whole cycle of life of people who have been affected. For example, in education, children who are stunted, for example, tend to repeat more than normal children.
Okay.
And we try to estimate, for example, the cost of repetition that the families, the government, and the society incur because of those repetitions. For example, for the health sector, stunted children, for example, tend to be more sick than the others. And this has a cost also for their families and for the society and for the government. And as for the productivity, it has been demonstrated children who are stunted have not developed their full potential to be able to, when they reach the working age, that's beyond 15 years to 64, they don't produce the full potential that they should have if they were not stunted. So there are some impediments, because even stunting affects even their cognitive development, that is the development of their brain, which yields some limitation when they grow up and start working.
Right.
So there have been studies that have really demonstrated that correlation.
Okay.
That as the president of the African Development Bank says, stunting children today leads to stunted economy tomorrow. So there's a correlation and there's a linkage. And actually, the figure that Dr. Margaret just mentioned, the largest cost is on productivity.
Right.
Because children who have been stunted, who are not part of the working force now, have those limitations, and those limitations have been estimated and put a dollar figure, and it's quite
not to talk about the ultimate, which is death. You know, and considering we can't even place a value on human life.
Yes. Yeah. For example, in Ghana, it has been demonstrated that for the year 2012, the workforce was reduced by 1 million people, children who die because of malnutrition. And these would have been an additional assets for the workforce, and that losses have been estimated and is part of the cost that have been produced by the study.
Okay. I also read about categories of undernutrition. You have mentioned stunting, which is, I suppose, where a child is too short for the age, because there's an index to which the height is pegged to the age. And then there's also I think there's wasting. Wasting is actually the acute manifestation of malnutrition or undernutrition.
Yes, it's one of the manifestations of undernutrition.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then, underweight, of course, that's self-explanatory. And another one that's, it's not common, but seems to be rising a bit. Obesity, child obesity. Okay. But can you tell us, among these categories, which of these categories are Ghanaian children most inclined towards as regards undernutrition, child undernutrition? So do we have more children wasting? Do we have most of the children wasting, or most of them malnourished, or most of them underweight, or most of them just obese?
I think from the study, it's the stunting.
Stunting is prevalent, is most prevalent.
It has been estimated that in 2012, there were about 23% of Ghanaian children who were stunted. 23%? 23%. That figures have gone down in 2014 to 19%, which means that there have been some progress. But still, it's 1 child out of 5 which is stunted.
Yeah, so where then do I place genes? Because there are, people who will just be born short.
Yes, I think before we get lost in that discussion.
I'm almost lost.
we should look at stunting not only within Ghana but also within the region.
Okay.
And the issue is not only the reverse trends or the failure to do as well as global is being done globally.
Yes, because you mentioned that we are not at par with that.
Yes, it's not limited only to Ghana, but it's also something which has been noticed in also West and Central Africa. And there are other factors which have been factored into the model and the formula which is used to make these calculations.
Okay.
And
so what would some be? What triggers this?
Well, you will have access to food, you would have food productivity, you would have, my colleague can help me further with some of these details, but poverty, there's so many factors. It's not only a genetic thing, and we should be careful not to make it a genetic thing, because that is not necessarily
because I'm thinking, there are people who will be born short.
Yes, by genes. And that's not necessarily, that's not what we are talking about here. Right. We are looking really at the access to food, to nutrition, agricultural practices, etc., which impact on that individual's access to have the right complement of food in order to thrive well. So, and micronutrients in order to thrive well. So it's not an isolated issue in itself.
So is this the first of its kind, this study?
No, the Ghana, as I said, is probably about the 10th country where the study have been undertaken, and the other countries have been Ethiopia, Malawi, Swaziland, Egypt, and others. And the Ghana results are quite, well, I would say less.
Say it as it is.
Ghana is in the medium range because, for example, for Ethiopia, it was found that they lose 17% of their GDP annually. And we are just finishing another study in Chad where they are losing $6 billion a year on their GDP because of the malnutrition. So the Ghana figures are not very alarming, but it requires that some additional effort needs to be done to try to reduce those costs.
So, I mean, in Chad, in Ethiopia, where the study has been undertaken, are there indicators that suggest that this has raised a significant level of awareness, on child undernutrition in these economies? And in fact, has this gone a long way to influence policy, so that we prioritize nutrition in the national agenda?
Yes, credit must be given to African heads of state and ministers of health, because once the initial COA studies were done, they actually took it seriously. And the first thing they did was to raise it to the level of the heads of state, and a decision was passed encouraging all other countries to do the COA study. And in some countries, it has already advised and influenced policy change in those countries because they're looking at their long-term development. And this also starts with the African Union itself, which has its Agenda 2063. And in that, it has an aspiration to eliminate hunger and insecurity by 2063. Additionally,
food insecurity?
Yes, food insecurity by 2063. Additionally, ministers of state of health started a campaign, which is also called their RISE, to eliminate stunting. So it focuses on stunting in particular by 2025, and this has also been adopted by our heads of state as a global campaign.
So this should be easy for Ghana, considering this, we're looking at figures 6.4% of GDP when Ethiopia is recording some 17%. What are the expected outcomes? This should be easy.
Normally, yes. I would like just to add to what Dr. Margaret has said, that in the implementation, there is a national implementation team which is created in each country and which is composed of senior staff from the various ministries who have a stake in all these issues, including the Minister of Finance, Minister of Economic Planning, Health, Agriculture, Social Affairs, and so on and so forth. And particularly the implication of the Minister of Finance is very important because at the end of the day, most of the initiative or the action to be undertaken has to be funded, has to be covered by budget allocation. And in many countries, the implication would be critical to understand that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and that some of the limited resources of the government, some of which should be allocated to funding nutrition intervention. So these have been some of the impact that the study has had. At the same time also, I think the report constitutes an advocacy tool for government to go to their partners and to tell them that we would like your full support to address this challenge of malnutrition in our economy. Hence, some initiative following these studies and others are now being launched, for example, by the African Development Bank and by the Global Panel for Agriculture, Food System and for Nutrition, chaired by the former President Kufuor. Now they want now to launch an initiative called African Leaders for Nutrition, where in which they want to really sensitize African head of state, including former head of state, to really take specific action to address this issue of malnutrition.
Quickly, finally, Dr. Margaret, the UNICEF report I saw on undernutrition, child undernutrition, also indicated that most child undernutrition actually starts in the womb. You know, so the status of the fetus's nutrition is also important. That means that we should draw a link between this and maternal undernutrition.
We certainly do.
Yeah.
And we certainly have. And that is also reflected in the African Health Strategy, which also goes on to 2030, to which all heads of state have signed up to.
Okay. All right. So, well, let's see. When are we launching this? When are we doing the Ghana launch of this cohort study?
Tomorrow morning.
Okay, just tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Where?
At the Accra Conference Center.
Okay, the Accra International Conference Center. You know what? Well, the ILO has recommended, it's World Breastfeeding Week. The ILO has recommended an extension, you know, of maternity leave from 3 or so months to 6 months. What's your take on this? Women's groups in Ghana are calling for this extension, just so that we're talking about undernutrition, just so that mothers can have more time, you know, and the opportunity to breastfeed their children and give some exclusive breastfeeding for at least the first 6 months of a child's life.
As a mother myself,
yes.
I will certainly recommend that.
Thank you very much. My guests have been Dr. Margaret Agama Anyete. She's with the AU Commission, the African Union Commission. Mr. Thomas Yangas of the United Nations World Food Programme. And, well, it's the Cost of Hunger in Africa study on Ghana. So, well, we're launching the study tomorrow at the Accra International Conference Center. What time?
8 o'clock, I understand.
Okay.
8 for 9.
Who are invited? I suppose I can just show up.
Yes, yeah, you'll be welcome.
Thank you very much. You're watching New Day.